fantastic fashion against Hull Kingston Rovers, and then they didn't do much in the cup last year. So what say you on these?
Consistency is going to be the issue for Salford for me this year. I love their backline. I think there's some real exciting players in that backline, guys that I would pay the admission fee alone to watch, in Justin Carney, Josh Jones and Junior Sal. They're three players I could feasibly see in pretty much any Super League side, and obviously the heroics of Gareth O'Brien at fullback notwithstanding, keeping their halves fit in and firing is going to be really important. Now, recently they've acquired Todd Carney to play in the halves as well, so he will share duties between 6 and 7 with Robert Louis and Michael Dobson, you would think. These are all boys who've spent big chunks of seasons out injured in the past, so managing these lads and getting them to click with each other is going to be really key for Salford. If they can do that and lay a platform for these guys to feed that back line, I think they could have a good season. My question around Salford is in the pack. There's some talent there. I like Ben Murdoch-Masilla. I like Mark Flanagan from time to time. I just don't think it's the most dynamic pack I've ever seen. I see it getting beaten by a lot of other Super League sides. Now, if they can prove me wrong, and lads like the Wallen brothers can come in and add some grit to that team, maybe Lee Mossop, who's coming on loan for the year, maybe he brings some experience and a bit more go forward. But for me, there's a big question mark over the pack there at Salford. So that's going to be where their season is made or broken. The loss of Josh Griffin is huge. I think he's a tremendous player and a fabulous acquisition for Hull, and I don't really think they've replaced him particularly well. But you've got to take your hat off to the good doctor with splashing the cash on Todd Carney, a rep player of some repute who on his day could rinse out pretty much every side in Super League. So there's potential there at Salford. For me, it's all about consistency and Ian Watson developing that side of their game.
Fair enough. For me, Salford are the team that I hope I'm wrong on the most of all the teams, but I have them in a sort of group that only one of them will finish in the top 8 of the group, along with a couple of other sides, and I sort of think Salford might just fall out and then play in the middle 8s, but be a cut above the championship sides this time around, and hopefully they'll approach the earlier rounds of the middle 8s with a better sort of attitude and more stability and less kind of pantomime. That's what I would hope for them. But before they signed Todd Carney, the thing I wasn't really impressed that much by the recruitment, because I don't think they have great depth. Not bringing for their own juniors in any sort of quality or quantity is a big problem for depth. You talk about like the Wallen brothers, they're the last players to come through and make
they're not very young anymore, are they?
Any sort of impact really that have come through their own system. And like you say, it's 5 years since they came through, 6 years. Carney added to Louis and Dobson does address the half-back depth, because that's 3 strong players in those positions. His Catalan stats were played 32, won 18, drew 2, lost 12, so won more than he lost when he played. 9 tries and 31 assists, so on average scored or at least contributed towards a try in every game he played, and then some. So and then Leigh Mossop and Chris Willem, I suppose they do bring good characters to the squad. That'll be important for Salford, as I feel they need to adjust their expectations, redefine what success is. Success is not being in risk of really faltering in that middle 8s and getting through it safely. That's success for them, I think. On the positive side, I think the first choice 1 to 7 that you talked about will cause problems for everyone. The fate may depend on how often this group stay together. They do have the worst of one particular position group in the league, and that's hooker for me. I think with Logan Tompkins being your starting hooker, and then Josh Wood, who I've not seen kick on in his 10 or so Super League appearances over the last 2 years, and Chris Brining, who's a total unknown quantity coming from York, but he could be a star. We don't know, I suppose. I think it's a bit of a shame that they didn't keep hold of that Sean Kenny lad who's ended up at Swinton. But that's sort of where I sort of see them. Fitness dependent.
Do you see a space for Michael Dobson going in at hooker, and then pairing Carney and Louis?
It's an option, I suppose. It is an option, or Robert Louis, but you mentioned the 2 players that are fitness dependent. Josh Jones and Murdoch Masilla, two of their strike weapons, will start the season on the treatment table, which is a shame for them.
It is. Okay, who have you picked out as their...
No, you go first.
Oh, I'll go first. Okay, wonderful. I always defer to you, don't I?
No.
Well, it's pretty obvious who the key man is, really. It's the big recruitment, isn't it? Todd Carney. His performances are going to have a massive... I didn't know which Carney you meant.
No, well,
Todd Carney.
Could be both.
Well, yeah, I mean, the performances of both Carneys are going to be important, and keeping both Carneys on the pitch for one reason or another is going to be important to Salford. But I think Todd just edges out his cousin Justin for me. I don't think they're really cousins.
In spirit.
Certainly in spirit. They certainly could. Yeah, that's a very good point. Todd Carney is a phenomenal rugby league footballer when he's concentrating and when he's fit and when he's in the zone. And if he does that more often than not for Salford, I see them having a decent year. Young player, rising star for me. I'd put Evalds question mark, but actually I want to look at Ryan Lannon, the young forward, who started to make some appearances for them last season and looks again like one of the few young Salfordian players that's going to come through the system and do something and actually play for his hometown, or play for the youth system. I'm not sure exactly where he was born, but play for that badge and play for that shirt. And he was a good looking player toward the back end of last year. So I'm going to go with Ryan Lannon.
You've got the same one as me for the rising star. He's impressed me when in 2016. I hope he gets more game time in 2017. He only had 9 Super League games last year. Didn't get big minutes, but when you look at the plays he produced, I think he produced far more positive plays on the field than he did negative plays. So I'll look to see him get more time in Super League as this year goes on. Junior Sal's, though, my key man.
Yeah.
What I've done, I suppose I picked him as the best player in the squad before Todd Carney signed. But I still think he's, joint best maybe. He's like a heart of that team in a way, emotionally.
He's got that animal and that mongrel that Carney has, but he retains a level of self-control that Carney loses, and I think he controls that aggression so well, but there's so much of it, and it just makes him such a threatening player, doesn't it?
Yeah, and if he can play 19, 20 games of the first 23, they've got a chance of making the 8, I think. It's that sort. I think it's that calibre of player for this Salford side. Yeah,
well, that's exactly what I think will happen as well. I've got them finishing. It's a steady away start for our predictions for me this year. It's 8th and 8th all through the season for Salford for me. I think they've got enough quality to get in that top 8. It's where they deserve to be last year, and I think with the addition of Todd Carney, they're now in a position to say that they've augmented the squad in comparison to last year. So 8th place and then rooted to the bottom of the Super 8s, I would say. So 8 and 8 for me all year for Salford.
Any sort of run in the cup?
Quarterfinals. I think that's certainly within their grasp. What say you?
Yeah, maybe a quarter-final in the cup, but I'm not expecting them to focus on that. On the day they could beat anyone though. But 10th in Super League, I think. I wouldn't be shocked if they made the 8 at all, like I said at the sort of opening. But 10th in the 8, and then third in the 8. 10th in the league and then 3rd in the 8 in the middle 8. I don't see it being a problem 3rd. I see it being a comfortable 3rd and then wind down. But I don't see it being that top 8 year, unfortunately.
Okay, so we did get some feedback from a few more of our Salford contingent, and some big Super League pod names got in touch with us, Mark, didn't they?
Yeah, Owen Hughes. He said to make 8th and make the Super 8s and then to perform poorly in the Super 8s, but that's fine as long as we do a Hull FC from 2015, jumping up in 2016, and use that stability to build for a far better season in 2018. Paul King, he said top 6 finish and a run to the semi-final of the Challenge Cup, avoid any off-season field issues for once. Dean, he's got them kind of in the same idea as me, but it's 7th to 9th place in the table he thinks they'll get. John thinks they'll get in the top 8, and Mark Rosevear, he popped out from under the bridge to say, after a tough start against strong opposition and picking up a few injuries, they'll put together a decent run of form and gain confidence to finish either 8th or 9th. Anything else would be a bonus. I think that's all really sensible stuff from the majority of the Salford fans there.
They're a realistic bunch.
Yeah, I like those thoughts there.
I do too. Thank you for getting in touch, gentlemen. Right, Mark. Next team on the docket, Huddersfield Giants, for us to cast our eyes over. What say ye? because last year they were 12th in Super League, which was a disappointing season for them, wasn't it? Scraped up third in the qualifiers and then made it to the quarter-finals of the Challenge Cup. Do you see it being much different for them this time out?
Yeah, they did the sort of £1 million game rehearsal, didn't they? Almost,
they did.
In the middle eights. It's hard to put our finger on what went wrong for the Giants in 2016, really, to make them so bad compared to the recent seasons. Their average margin of victory when they won games in Super League, this is in the 23 regular season rounds, was 15 points. Their average margin of defeat was only 9 points. They lost quite a lot of close games. 8 games that they lost were by 1 converted try or less. If you put that into perspective, they might have finished 12th, but if you turn half of those 8 games around into wins, they would actually have just about scraped the top 8. I expect them to bounce back somewhat, and I do see them just scraping into that top 8. Although it wouldn't be shocking if they missed out again. It wouldn't be a surprise to me, but I do think that they'll just get into that 8. Danny Bruff's still a top performer on his day, and then Brearley's got a relationship that they've developed now. They played for Scotland together as well as sort of countering some stuff. And also I think Brearley's grown into his role at Huddersfield. He had a couple of great performances in the qualifiers when I saw him play there. I think as well, all the players they've taken from Bradford, whilst they're not star names, I think they're all capable of being middle of the table Super League players. What they've done is they've given themselves depth to their squad in an affordable way by taking on these Bradford players, and then I'd go one further than that in Adam O'Brien, who I expect to make the starting hooker role his own by the end of the season. I think he is a quality player. I think the other question mark I have over the squad is prop depth. When I look at the props they've got on the book, the players that can play in that position, I only pick out 3, and then Akuma Tai maybe is a 4th, depending on how much size he has at different times in the year. It tends to be with Akuma Tai if they put him in the back or the front row. Outside of that, there's question marks for me over just how good Shannon Wakeman might be, just how good Paul Clough is at Super League level now. Then Nathan Mason, Tyler Dickinson, Matty English, they're younger players, so it's to me to be seen how good they'll get if they get injuries to the frontline props.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. I'm concerned by the level of turnover in this team. It's been an unsettling time. You could say that with Rick Stone coming in and taking over, that this is his time to do that, and it might be something that you'd expect. But I see that high level of turnover as having an impact. It's negated somewhat by the fact that the vast majority of players that have come into Huddersfield all shared a lift to Bradford last year, so they all sort of know each other. So that takes some of the edge off it. But I'm not sure. A lot of these were lads who were performing relatively well in the Championship, but not delivering stellar performances, I would say, with perhaps the exception of Dale Ferguson. Gaskell's second last year was atrocious at times, and his attitude was shocking by the end of it, so that's going to be something they'll have to work on. It's also important to know that they've given him the 4 jersey. Well, if you're playing Lee Gaskell at centre, any coach worth his salt is just going to run his centres and that wingers at the Lee Gaskell turnstile. It could be Foster-esque. I'm genuinely worried for them if Rick Stone thinks Lee Gaskell's a centre, because it's just going to be free spin after free spin. And then that got me thinking about the quality of the squad overall. And again, it's not something I'm wildly impressed by. They really only have one wing that they attack on. That's the Cujo and McGilvray side. So, particularly now that you've got Lee Gaskell in at 4. I like Aaron Murphy. I think he's a good player. But I don't think they utilise both wings. I think there's a lot of pressure to get the ball to McGilvray and Cujo and let them do some work. That weakens them for me.
But
that does weaken them.
Looking at you, and I don't want to interject too much, but it's an unstoppable wing, though. But go on.
Well, nothing's unstoppable forever. Jake Mallow is a wild card choice to come in. He's only 22. He's a young lad with a bit of a reputation. This is a time for him to either kick on or just fizzle out, I would say. There is a lot of gelling for this squad to do. And I fear for them this year, to be perfectly honest. I'm not sure that they'll have a better year than last year, but I don't see them troubling the top 8, to be perfectly honest with you. I think this could be another tricky year for Huddersfield.
Right, well, Danny Bruff is obviously the key man. He runs the show. He makes sure he puts himself in that position to be the man who runs the show. He loves it being the main man. Maybe at his age, he's just about got enough legs to go around one or two more times, but he certainly he's got legs around him now.
Yeah.
His fitness and form is, is
key.
important.